Hello, everyone. So the voiceovers are over for now. My background's a little rough, so maybe the voiceovers will be coming back. But I do have the slightest trace of a bookshelf over here, so that kind of redeems the background. Anyway, today we'll be talking about the whistleblower Richard Hopkins of the post office. So the Richard Hopkins story is as weird as my chair is creaky. So we'll start at the beginning. On the 5th of November, Richard Hopkins says he overheard a conversation between two of his supervisors at the post office in Erie, Pennsylvania. And he says that they were talking about having collected ballots on the 4th of November, but having postmarked them for the 3rd of November. The reason why that's important is because in Pennsylvania, as long as you get your ballot in the mail by the 3rd, it can be counted late up until the 6th. But if it's collected after the 3rd, so on the 4th, it can't be counted, even if counting is still going on because it was collected late. So effectively what Hopkins is saying here is that the ballots collected on the 4th shouldn't have been counted, but they were mismarked in such a way to make sure that they would be counted.
And I heard him say to the supervisor that they messed up yesterday. I was like, oh, what did they mess up on? And he told the supervisor that they had postmarked one of the ballots for the 4th instead of the 3rd, because they were supposed to put them for the 3rd.
He also said that he was encouraged to collect ballots for the 4th, 5th, and 6th of November, so that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and that he thinks that these ballots may have been counted also, but he doesn't claim to have heard anyone talking about counting them. So on the 5th of November, Hopkins would give the story to Project Veritas. The next day, so on the 6th, he would sign a notarized and sworn affidavit to this effect. I'll put the affidavit in the description if you want to look at it. I also contacted the notarizer in Texas, and her lawyer gave me a video of the notarizing session, so that was cool. I'll have clips of that in this video. If you want to just watch the whole thing, I have it posted on my Patreon. You can just watch it for free. So that's there. So the first time I had ever heard of Project Veritas is a few years ago when they tried to get someone to lie about having been sexually assaulted by Roy Moore, then Senate candidate for Alabama, to the Washington Post, hoping that the Washington Post would publish the story, and then they could say, oh, look, it was fake, so that proves that you're biased and that you're not really, careful journalists. But the Washington Post didn't publish that story. Instead, they found out what Project Veritas was doing and wrote a story about what Project Veritas was doing. So anything that comes from them is a little suspect. It's not necessarily wrong, of course, but it's suspect. So I thought I would look into this and see if there was anything to it. Okay, so on the 5th, Hopkins overhears the conversation. It's a little weird that the supervisor would be talking about that in the open, but that's what he says what happened. Maybe they didn't know he was standing there. On the 6th, he signs an affidavit with Project Veritas. On the 9th, he gets questioned by two inspectors with the post office who were trying to get to the bottom of what happened. There's a full recording of that on Project Veritas's website. But on the 10th, Project Veritas releases an edited version of the interview, where they include two segments, one from about 2 minutes in and another one from about 45 minutes in, and they put them next to each other to make it sound as if they happened next to each other. They're taken out of context.
And so let me make good on that promise right away, okay? This storm is getting crazy, right? And it's out of a lot of people's control. And so the reason they called me in is to try to harness that storm, try to reel it back in before it gets really crazy, okay?
I understand.
Because we have senators involved, we have the Department of Justice involved, we have
Trump's lawyers team's gotten a hold of me.
I'm not, well, I am actually. I am trying to twist you a little bit because in that, believe it or not, your mind will kick in.
Okay.
We like to control our mind, and when we do that, we can convince ourselves of a memory But when you're under a little bit of stress, which is what I'm doing to you purposely, your mind can be a little bit clearer. And we're going to do a different exercise too to make your mind a little bit clearer. Okay?
Good to go.
So, but this is all on purpose.
Roger.
I'm not scaring you, but I am scaring you here.
The point is to prime their audience, so that when they do release the full version, they see it through a certain lens, that Hopkins was coerced, that he was tricked somehow, that he was, intimidated into saying something he didn't mean. Because what Hopkins ends up doing is editing his affidavit. He admits in this interview that there's a lot of interpretation in the affidavit. He walks back a lot of the things he says. He says, Project Veritas wrote it all for me.
That this is a lot of interpretation and not necessarily fact. Is that significant?
It was written up by Veritas' lawyer.
That's fair. That's fair.
Okay, so, but just so I'm getting this correct, as we sit here today, you wouldn't swear to that paragraph.
At this point, no.
And they go through paragraph by paragraph and edit it. So naturally, this is kind of a disaster for Project Veritas. So they release this edited version on the 10th to make it seem as if he was bullied. And then a full day later, on the 11th, they publish the full version. Also, the part where Agent Russell Strasser tells Hopkins, look, I'm not trying to scare you, but I'm scaring you. The context in which that happens is when they're discussing Richard Hopkins' GoFundMe, which as of the 10th, before it was taken down, was worth over $130,000. And so what Strasser tells him is that if you aren't telling the full truth and you get this money, you can be held legally accountable for that. You could be charged with fraud or something. But Project Veritas can't, because it's your GoFundMe, not their GoFundMe. It's in your name, right? So he's telling him, like, this is serious. Like, he's not intimidating him. He's giving him a warning, like, dude, this isn't 100% accurate. You could be accountable for this.
I'm going to tell you why. One of the things I'm trying to protect you against. Okay. There is money involved in this, and you know that because of this
GoFundMe. I can't even touch it.
That's okay, but your name is associated with it.
Yeah.
Okay. And if I'm not scaring you, but I am scaring you here. Okay. If we are not 1,000% accurate with our honesty, and it can be argued that money was gained by, I'm going to say assumptions, they're going to say deceptions, that is, you could be held accountable for.
Understood.
And I am not going to allow that.
Okay.
That is why we are going to the exact words and the exact accuracy, because I'm not going to let you be put in that situation. Okay?
In fact, it was actually really reassuring to see how professional and kind they were to Hopkins. They tell him his rights early on. They tell him he can leave whenever he wants, right? That he's there voluntarily.
This interview is strictly voluntary, and I may leave or stop answering questions at any time. Got it? Or understand?
Yep.
When he reveals that he's wearing a wire, they don't even get annoyed with him. He says, I don't mind that you're recording me. That's fine.
I don't really care about the word interrogate. That doesn't bother
I
me.
would like to fix it because I feel bad. What is a better word for it?
If you want to, but let me tell you what I don't want. What I don't want is anyone who gets this statement that we write say, well, obviously he was coerced to make this statement, because they even changed the word interrogate so they would look back. You see what I'm saying?
I don't think I have to worry about that. I haven't turned off it. I was told to record, so no offense.
But are we being recorded?
Yeah.
Okay.
So everything is being heard, so I'm sorry. I'm letting you know now.
Okay. My only thing with that, I don't mind that we're being recorded. Again, this is an official investigation, and I don't know if we can release that without a Freedom of Information thing.
Okay.
That's the only. I don't want to get
I'm
you in
not
trouble.
planning.
But Hopkins' claim that Project Veritas wrote it for him and kind of directed it is believable, because when you look at the video of the notarizing, there's people with him. There's one person in the room with him, and there's one person on speakerphone with him during the notarizing.
Hey Jared, who?
Okay, that looks
That looks
Now, one of the voice sounds like George O'Keefe, the director of Project Veritas and the founder. I can't quite tell if it's him. It looks like it's him in the background, but maybe it isn't. But he's talking to someone else who he calls Jared, which is almost certainly the head attorney. I think they call him the chief legal officer for Project Veritas, named Jared Eade. So he had just been talking with them prior to the signing of the affidavit. So it's totally reasonable that they had a large hand in writing it, that Hopkins didn't fully understand what he was signing. So they question him for a while. At one point, Strasser takes him into the room where this apparently happened and demonstrates to him that he would have had difficulty hearing what his supervisors were talking about.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. I'm trying to gauge how loudly they had to be talking. So how loudly would you say they were talking?
Like an average conversation like
Like
you and
this?
me. Yeah.
Like this? So, and this is not me being slippery, okay?
Mhm.
But what we just did there, and I spoke like this, the first time I said anything, you could not hear me, okay?
Barely, yeah.
So,
And eventually, Hopkins does admit that he only heard a snippet of the conversation.
They say
I know the
remember.
postmarked 4th.
Postmarked 4th.
Yes.
The beginning.
No,
At the end.
at the
Yeah.
end, postmarked 4th.
So you heard Mark.
One was postmarked the 4th.
All third, one postmarked 4th.
Yes.
That's what you heard.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes.
And this is really all he heard. And he assumed that what they were talking about was backdating them, although he says he never heard the word backdate.
Okay. Did you ever hear the word backdate?
No.
So all postmarked on the 3rd but one on the 4th doesn't necessarily refer to backdating. He assumed that's what it means, and he admits that this was an assumption that he made.
Do you agree with me that based on what you and I discussed today, that this paragraph, and I haven't read the rest of the affidavit, but this paragraph specifically, number 3, has a significant amount of interpretation in it?
Yes.
And interpretation is not necessarily fact. Do you agree?
Yes.
There's other ways to interpret that, right? All postmarked on the 3rd and one on the 4th. That could mean that the ballots we collected on the 3rd, like, don't worry, we postmarked them all on the 3rd, but one we did accidentally on the 4th, right? And Hopkins would say later that this was a contentious conversation. So he might be mad that they postmarked one on the 4th when it should have been on the 3rd, right? That could have been the context of the conversation. Another one is maybe they did accidentally postmark them, but the reason why he's annoyed is because he's trying to fix it. He's like, no, you shouldn't have done that, right? So they're trying to fix their mistake. Another way to interpret it is that they collected all of them on the 3rd, but that they only collected one on the 4th, and that was correctly postmarked on the 4th. The reason why there's not going to be too many mail-in ballots sent on the 4th in the first place is because, one, this is one city, Erie, Pennsylvania, and most people know that you can't send in your ballot after the 3rd, right? So if the 3rd passes and you still haven't sent in your ballot, most people aren't like, well, I'll just send it in anyway and see if they count it anyway, right? So there's probably not going to be that many people who try to do that, right? So if they get them all on the 3rd, they postmark them for the 3rd, and then they got one on the 4th, and they're like, we postmarked it on the 4th, like, don't worry. That also could have been the context of the conversation. So there's 3 different ways to interpret what he's saying besides postmarking, all of which are more plausible, or at least as plausible as his description. Now, if you've been following the story, you'll know that Hopkins recanted he's recanting. Right? He took back his take back, because no one called no take backsies.
At this very moment, looking at a article written by Washington Post. Says that I fabricated the allegations of ballot tampering. I'm here to say that I did not recant my statements. That did not happen. That is not what happened.
I think the reason for this is that Hopkins expressed some concern in his interview about basically being seen as an asshole for having made this mistake and being seen as a liar, as an idiot.
Now, will people start coming out and saying I'm a liar because I'm saying this?
He says at one point, people are going to say, I assumed that means I made an ass out of you and me.
I always think of that word, assumptions, and I think of ass of you and me. So that's why I'm sitting here thinking, like, this really does make me feel like an asshole.
Like, yeah, Hopkins, you did make an ass of yourself and other people, but it's like, it's okay if you just admit your mistake. But there was a Washington Post article, which I know Hopkins read and was mad about, which says that he admitted to fabricating it. Which, when I listen to the video, he doesn't admit to fabricating it. In fact, what he admits to is that I may have made a mistake, not that he made it all up. And I think that's why he can't fully take it back. But it's important to note that when they edit the affidavit, they do so paragraph by paragraph, and that Hopkins does this voluntarily, and not just voluntarily, but enthusiastically. Like he actually really wants to change it.
Right now, I think we are better off if we do a updated signed statement.
Okay,
Are you with me on that?
I
Do you
understand.
agree with me on that?
Yes,
Do you understand it's voluntary?
yes.
Okay, but do you understand how this
Will save my ass, yes.
will? Your words, yes.
Yes, but it's true at this point because, yes, you're
I
right.
want to do.
I didn't even think too much on it when I was reading it. So.
I understand.
This case is self-debunking. The eyewitness says he doesn't stand by it, 100%. Really, this is a story about Project Veritas being shitty. Again.